The film opens with a covert operation carried out by the Poinix squad in the country of Oste. Their primary mission is to track down an arms dealer named Rear Kovalov, while their secondary target is Mauser Maxim, a weapons designer developing a highly dangerous superweapon. Brandon Beckett and his partner, Sony, a sniper on his first field mission, wait outside to oversee the operation. Meanwhile, the Poinix team sneaks into the compound cautiously to avoid triggering any alarms. Brandon and Sony have already locked onto their targets, the guards on the rooftop and entrance, while the ground team infiltrates through the sewers to hack the CCTV system. From the surveillance footage, they confirm that Kovalov is inside his office. Brandon and Sony work together to simultaneously take down the enemies on the rooftop and the main entrance. Once the area is secure, they signal the team to move into the complex. Team C positions itself around the enemy's vehicles, sabotaging them by slashing the tires of several cars, while Team A moves toward the office to locate Kovalov. Meanwhile, Team Delta successfully secures the ammunition room and neutralizes several guards outside. As Team Alpha, led by Modise, approaches the office, a guard spots them. A chase ensues, but they eventually manage to take down the guard right in front of Kovalov's office door. However, Kovalov doesn't surrender easily. He immediately fires a shotgun. Team Alpha struggles to hold their ground under the attack, while inside, Kovalov orders his men to eliminate the intruders and sound the alarm. He also instructs Maxim to take him to the laboratory where the superweapon, known as the Angel of Death, is stored. Elsewhere, Team Alpha continues to hold off waves of incoming enemies. Brandon once again locks onto his targets, a hostile sniper and a scout in the watchtower, and, working with Sony, successfully eliminates both. Meanwhile, Team C faces intense pressure, prompting Hilo to step in and assist his teammates, leaving Hera to stand guard in the field. Teams A and B finally manage to corner Kovalov in his office, while Team D remains stationed in the ammunition room, awaiting further orders. Desperate, Kovalov calls the Prime Minister to remind him of their agreement and requests full militia support. After ending the call, he unveils the superweapon and urges Maxim to activate it immediately. However, Maxim warns him that although the weapon theoretically works, it remains unstable and could fire uncontrollably. He attempts to calibrate its trajectory, but time runs out. The Poinix squad successfully ambushes Kovalov just before the weapon is fully activated. Dis then says, "It's over." But with a sinister grin, Kovalov replies, "Yes, it is over, for you." In an instant he activates the superweapon. A massive shockwave erupts, striking everyone around and sending them flying with immense force. And this is Sniper. The last 10. The scene then shifts to 48 hours earlier. Master Gunnery Sergeant Brandon Beckett arrives at a remote airstrip in Costa Verde, where he is greeted by Colonel Bongani Modisi. "My name is just Brandon Beckett now. I'm no longer part of the U.S. Marine Corps," he says. He then asks for a briefing on the operation and adds, "I've spent the last 36 hours in the air, passing through airports without customs. My guess is, this country doesn't even know I'm here." Elsewhere, Colonel Gabriel Stone officially deploys Brandon to join the mission. Brandon responds flatly, "I'm just a Marine following orders." However, he quickly realizes that he has actually been sent to lead one of the CIA's most lethal covert ops teams, despite the fact that, officially, the CIA is not supposed to be involved in this mission. Shortly after, two team members arrive to support the operation, Nadia Abrams and Casanova Diaz, better known as Nova. Nova introduces himself and shares a personal story about his father, Bruno Diaz, who was killed because he cared too much for this country. Worse, Nova knows he was framed for his father's death. Nova explains that his uncle, Romeus, has exploited the suffering of the people to seize power. He has sold the country to the highest bidder, including Rear Kovalov, an arms dealer. Nova also reveals that Kovalov has an agreement with the Prime Minister of Costa Verde, granting him full freedom to manufacture and sell weapons as long as he continues supplying the Prime Minister's private army. Nova then points to the emblem on his uniform and declares that he is part of the Poinix rebel group. "Capturing Kovalov and bringing him to justice is the only way to save Costa Verde and reclaim our rights," he says firmly. When Nova locates Kovalov's base, Colonel Modise immediately redirects satellite surveillance to monitor the area. Nova explains that Kovalov only visits occasionally to collect Maxim's latest weapons, but 2 nights ago, heat signatures were detected from a helicopter landing at the compound. "So we strike in 48 hours, Modis states without hesitation. Knowing their time is extremely limited, Brandon requests extra time for reconnaissance, topographical assessments, and drone analysis. However, Nova casually replies, "That's already taken care of. Just do your part. Shoot." They arrive at the Point X operations base. There, Brandon asks whether the trusted source who recommended him for this mission was his father. Modis looks at him for a moment before answering, "Yes. I knew your father. He was a legendary sniper, but I never met him." However, Colonel Modis wanted to introduce Brandon to someone he was already familiar with, Rosenberg, aka Ciro, Brandon's former comrade from a previous mission. Brandon was shocked to see Ciro there. The man had previously disappeared without a trace. Ciro explained that Modis had contacted him and told him about a rare opportunity he couldn't afford to miss. Modis added that since Ciro's arrival, he had been providing valuable insights about the mission. "Why couldn't you let this mission go?" Brandon asked. Ciro looked at him seriously. "Rear Kovalov. He's been Modis's target for a long time." Kovalov was no ordinary target. He was responsible for explosions and chaos across various parts of the world, from Africa to America. Ciro first met Modis while serving in national security, during a time when global intelligence networks were actively hunting Kovalov. When Kovalov crossed into the US, Modis and Ciro had planned to capture him together. However, Kovalov remained operational because Ciro was caught up in bureaucratic red tape. By the time his clearance finally came through, Kovalov had already vanished. Brandon frowned. "Why didn't you ever tell me this before?" Ciro sighed. "I was close to catching him twice, but I always failed." Brandon glanced at him before replying, "I've failed a few times too. But I find out why, reload and take the shot again." Ciro nodded. "The difference is, this time, we know where he is." According to their intel, Kovalov was more vulnerable than ever. Nova, a technology expert and informant from Costa Verde, had tracked down Kovalov's personal weapons designer, Marksman, who was currently operating in the region. Brandon turned to Ciro. "What do you know about Nova?" Ciro leaned back in his chair. "A tech genius, but in the field, not as sharp." Nova had traced secret payments and shell companies linked to Costa Verde's prime minister, all of which were connected to Kovalov. By following the money trail, Nova identified Kovalov's main compound and immediately contacted Modis to organize the operation. He was confident their team had enough resources to carry out the mission undetected. Additionally, Nova mentioned that Modis was a highly respected patriot within the SSA and had the freedom to choose his missions. The strike team Brandon and Ciro were then introduced to Modis's Special Forces team, known by their codenames: Hilo, strategy expert; Mara, heavy weapons specialist; Guru, communications and technology expert; Perel, L, Modis's second-in-command. There were still other members yet to be introduced. As Brandon heard the names, Hilo looked at him curiously. "So, how many enemies have you taken down?" he asked, teasingly. Brandon smirked slightly. "I only count the missions I complete, not the bullets I fire." Suddenly, another voice spoke up. "That's the kind of mindset we need from a mentor." A figure stepped forward and introduced himself. Taboy, a sniper on his first field assignment. Though inexperienced in real combat, Taboy's record was impressive. He had taken down a high-profile target within the South African National Defense Force and never missed in training. However, without actual battlefield experience, he was still seen as unproven. Brandon glanced at Modis and said flatly, "I'm not a teacher." Before Modis could respond, Taboy interrupted. "I don't need a teacher, I just need to prove myself." Simulation training. The team began simulation training. The practice area was designed to resemble Kovalov's compound. Colonel Modis and his deputy, Angel, provided a briefing on the target situation. Modis pointed to several strategic locations on the screen, warning that the enemy had heavy artillery. The plan was to strike at dawn when the guards were exhausted and least alert. The team would use that window to infiltrate the compound undetected, utilizing ultraviolet technology. Angel then displayed a photo of Marksman, Kovalov's mad scientist and weapons designer. "Remember," Modis said, "be prepared with gas masks. If you're exposed to anthrax or nerve gas, you'll have limited time to retreat to the tunnels." Next, they moved to a private dock, where a fishing vessel had been prepared. The entire team had to remain below deck until the ship reached international waters. The primary and secondary objectives remained Kovalov and Maxim. If possible, capturing them alive would be even more valuable. The mission had only just begun. However, if the enemy resists, the team is authorized to neutralize the threat. For this mission, they are the Phoenix Unit. Strike teams, Alpha Team, Nadia, Ciro, and Colonel Modise will hunt down Kovalov. Bravo Team, Ciro will lead Jensen and Jet. Charlie Team, Hera and Halo. Delta Team, Nova and Angel. Kovalov is protected by Prime Minister Diaz, who controls a large militia and often handles his dirty work. If news of this operation leaks, the original 20 guards could quickly swell to 100 armed militia members. When asked why the Phoenix rebels weren't involved in this operation, Nova explained that they were the last resort to reclaim the country if the mission failed. Using them now would be a last-ditch option. Sniper Unit, Brandon and Sony. The final squad within the team was the Sniper Unit, consisting of Sony and Brandon. During training, Sony turned to Brandon and asked, "Between you and me, how many confirmed targets do you have?" Brandon remained calm. "The first kill is the only one that matters. It's the hardest." Sony paused for a moment. "I used to ask myself the same thing. Am I really going to shoot this person? Is this justified?" Brandon shook his head. "On the battlefield, there's no time to answer that question. The target answers it for you. If you hesitate, the enemy pulls the trigger first, and that could mean your death or your teammates. Sometimes taking one life means saving many others. So, if you have to pull the trigger, make sure you do it right." That night, the team gathered for dinner. Suddenly, Jensen spoke up. "No one compares to Angel." Some team members perked up with curiosity. Eventually, Nova decided to share Angel's story. Years ago, a man named Moses Mogale tried to blow up a gas station, intending to kill countless people. With his body burning and a weapon in his hand, he kept advancing. Angel jumped in to stop him, even after being stabbed multiple times. With 11 stab wounds and surrounded by flames, he still managed to take the man down. The room fell silent. Everyone was in awe of Angel's bravery. Jensen smirked. "Show them your scars." Casually, Angel lifted his shirt, revealing the scars on his abdomen. Hera playfully grinned. "And what about your missing pinky finger, already sold on the black market?" Nova burst out laughing, followed by the rest of the team. Then, the focus shifted to Hera and Halo, known as the Axe Twins. Someone asked where the nickname came from. Hera explained that she had served in the French armed forces and worked as a peacekeeper on the Lebanon border. Meanwhile, Halo was from the Canadian Armed Forces and participated in Operation Ultra under the UN. One day during a routine patrol, a suicide bomber detonated near our armored vehicle, Hera said. "Everyone was killed, except the two of us. We were trapped in an old building surrounded by militants. When our bullets ran out, the only weapons we had left were our tactical axes." Halo added, "We had to fight to survive." Curious, Brandon asked, "So that's why they call you the Axe Twins?" Halo chuckled. "Something like that. But tell me, does the CIA have exclusive merchandise like the one you're wearing?" Brandon smirked. "Only for select members." The night before the mission. The next day, Brandon and Sony went hunting together. Deep in the forest, Sony opened up about his family. "My family were freedom fighters," he said proudly. "My grandfather was part of Umkhonto we Sizwe, the ANC's military wing led by Mandela. He was killed in 1986. My father later joined the military and died in a battle led by Modise." Brandon looked at him. "So you're following in their footsteps?" Sony nodded. "Of course. I want to carry on their legacy as a patriot." Meanwhile, elsewhere, Ciro approached Angel, who was sketching something. "For my daughter," Angel said, staring at the drawing. "It's inspired by a folktale about a one-eyed monster." Ciro frowned. "I've never heard that story before." Angel sighed. "It's been a long time since I last saw her." On the other side of camp, Brandon observed Nova, who was working while listening to music. "Classic remixes and EDM," Nova said with a grin. "My mom introduced me to music. She taught me piano, but I was more interested in coding and hacking. I feel like I was meant to be a digital soldier." But he carried a heavy burden. The Prime Minister, who was also his uncle, would surely see his actions as a betrayal. "I'm not doing this just for myself. I'm doing it for the people of Costa Verde, and for my father," he said with determination. "If they call this treason, then that's a price I'm willing to pay." The final briefing. Colonel Modise gathered the team for their last briefing. "Tomorrow, we face a threat that endangers countless lives. We must stop Rear Kovalov from selling weapons and killing innocent people," he declared. This mission must be completed. Live or die, we move as one. We can only rely on ourselves. We are all we need. With the fire of determination burning in their eyes, the team listened as Modise concluded. Get some rest. We move at midnight. Long story short, Dean was sent back to the beginning of the film after the explosion. Meanwhile, Brandon, monitoring the situation from outside, immediately contacted his team. Whoever is inside, report the situation immediately. Realizing the situation was getting critical, Brandon decided to enter the complex. Inside, a few people were still alive, though severely injured. Kovalov regained consciousness, only to find himself staring down the barrel of Ciro's gun. Elsewhere, Angel and Nova from Delta Team reported to Commander Modise that Alpha and Bravo teams were with him, and that the two primary targets had been secured. Modise then ordered all teams to regroup inside the building. However, just as they gathered, the entire complex suddenly trembled violently, as if an earthquake had struck. The source of the tremors was a sonic wave weapon fired by Kovalov. In the ensuing chaos, Modise tried to give orders, but his voice was cut off. Within moments he collapsed, his energy completely drained. Kovalov smirked. I've planned for all of this. We have some time before the militia arrives. He ordered his men to retrieve data from the hard drives in the lab where the weapon had been developed. But the weapon's effects were already taking hold. One by one, the team members began to fall. Dizzy, nauseous, and eventually losing consciousness. Nadia, Hilo, Jensen, and Jet collapsed, powerless. The remaining team members could only watch as their comrades suffered under the weapon's deadly effects. Ciro, still standing, explained that he had been outside the blast radius. However, Angel began to question why Ciro wasn't in the lab when Alpha Team entered. An argument broke out. You weren't there, Angel. I had to fight off guards that came out of nowhere. Ciro snapped in frustration. The tension escalated when Nova asked, what do we do now that Modise is dead? Ciro tried to rally the team. We've lost half our squad, but we don't have time to mourn. 100 militia fighters are on their way here. Angel insisted that they bring back the bodies of their fallen teammates, but Hera argued that it was impossible in the time they had left. In the midst of the heated debate, Brandon took command. And who made you leader? Angel asked, suspicious. No one, Brandon responded firmly. But my head is clear, and yours isn't. Take a deep breath. We need to stay calm and focus. Brandon then assigned tasks. Hera and Angel would be responsible for moving the fallen team members to the evacuation tunnels, while Nova and he would head to the laboratory. At the lab, they found a computer still powered on. As they examined the data, they discovered that the weapon used microwave frequencies to disrupt brain functions. I remember Modise once mentioning a similar weapon that Kovalov sold to North Korea, Brandon recalled. It was further developed in 2021 and later sold to Russia. Back then, 130 protesters suffered dizziness, nausea, headaches, and fainting. This version is far more lethal. Ciro wanted to destroy the weapon immediately, but Brandon suggested they first understand its technology. If the militia gets their hands on this, the Prime Minister will just rebuild it. If that happens, mass devastation is inevitable, Brandon explained. Nova quickly began copying the data from the hard drive but warned that they wouldn't be able to take the entire server. Suddenly, the sound of approaching militia vehicles filled the air. Hera reported that they were now completely surrounded. Ciro turned to Brandon. What's your plan? Brandon suddenly remembered something. Modise once told me that he parked a satellite above us. He instructed Nova to transfer all the weapons data to the satellite, ensuring it could be sent to global intelligence agencies. We upload the data, then we destroy the weapon, Brandon declared. Nova agreed but warned that the upload process would take time. Meanwhile, the militia was closing in fast. We can't let this information fall into the wrong hands, Brandon said. We hold our ground and fight. Angel saw this as a suicide mission and suggested they call for reinforcements. Another argument broke out, but Brandon urged everyone to stay focused. Remember Modise's final orders, he reminded them. Outside, the roar of militia vehicles grew louder. They had no choice. The battle was about to begin. Before taking his last breath, Modise gave one final order. Retrieve the information from the hard drive, details about the weapon developed by Marksman, who Kovalov sold it to, and how to stop it. If we can fully understand this technology, countless lives can be saved. This is a battle worth fighting for, Modise said before finally passing away. After hearing those words, the team began questioning Brandon's plan. The truth was, this mission was off the books, meaning there was no evacuation team coming for them. "It's time to take a stand," Brandon said firmly. "If anyone wants to leave, go ahead. But I'm staying to finish this mission. If you choose to stay, I'll show you how the 6 of us can take on 60. Brandon then assigned Nova one last option, calling in the Phoenix unit, something Modise had once mentioned. "Gather every weapon and round of ammo we have. We need to get creative if we want to win," Brandon ordered. That night, Nova received intel from the satellite. The critical data had been successfully received. Meanwhile, a militia caravan was heading toward the complex. They had 30 minutes before arrival. "Hera, take position near the garage. Angel, get to the rooftop. Timur, cover the south side. Adela, you're our sniper. Station yourself in the tower," Brandon instructed. He ensured every angle had overlapping fields of fire. The strategy was simple but deadly. This courtyard would become a graveyard for the militia. Brandon himself would fight while ensuring the file upload to the satellite was completed. He emphasized that Nova's workspace must be protected at all costs until the upload was done. Once the upload was complete, the next move was to cut the power, plunging the entire complex into total darkness. The team would then escape through the tunnels and regroup at the private dock, where Modise's boat was waiting. Before the team split up, Brandon delivered a final message. "Remember, we are evil Noma. Whether we capture the enemy alive or dead, our mission must be completed, whether we live or die in this lab." The night deepened, and Nova remained focused on the upload, which had already reached 50% completion. Brandon approached and handed her a phone. "This is our last line of defense," he explained. "The hallway leading to the lab is rigged with Semtex plastic explosives, all linked to this phone. If danger gets too close, press the first number. I call it the Hell Corridor. But don't press the second number. That will blow up this entire room. We only call that one when the team is inside the tunnels." Nova nodded, fully understanding the instructions. Elsewhere, Brandon approached Angel. Angel, now fully committed, admitted that Brandon's decision had been the right one. "Now all that's left is to fight," she said. Brandon gave a small smile, recalling his time in the NYPD, how he had been stabbed 11 times while saving lives. "We run toward danger if it means saving others," Brandon said. "In operations like this, winning or losing comes down to preparation. And we're ready. Your daughter will see her mother again. We're going to make it through this." Angel nodded, then took her position in the tower. At another tower, Brandon checked in with Sony. "What do you see?" he asked. Sony scanned the battlefield ahead. "Good vantage point. I can see the drone positions clearly, but things could still go south fast," he replied. Brandon nodded, assessing the team's readiness. "How do you feel?" "Ready," Sony said with confidence. Brandon smirked. "That's what I like to hear. But do you know what it truly means to be a warrior?" Sony looked at him puzzled. "You know you're protecting many people, even if it means facing the enemy alone," Brandon continued. "Remember one thing. Always keep your powder dry." Sony frowned. "What does that mean?" Brandon chuckled. "Advice from my father. It used to mean keeping your gunpowder dry so your weapon would fire. But now, it means stay sharp and be ready at all times." In the lab, Nova broke the silence over the radio. "The militia caravan is closing in," she reported. "Satellite thermal scans detect 80 hostiles." Hearing the report, Brandon immediately prepared for action. But before he left his position, Sony asked, "Why are you fighting on the front lines?" Brandon gave a faint smile. "Because leadership is action, not a position," he replied. At the garage, Hera was still struggling with the loss of her twin brother, Hilo. "I don't even know who I am anymore," she whispered. Brandon looked her in the eye. "You're still who you've always been, a warrior who never quits," he said. "Hilo knew the risks, we all did. He once told me, soldiers aren't built for retirement." Brandon turned to his entire team. "We finished this mission," he declared. "For Hilo, for Modise, for everyone we've lost." Taking a deep breath, he added, "We fight without fear, so others don't have to. So they can sleep peacefully, without ever knowing about the monsters lurking in the dark." In the distance, the rumble of approaching vehicles grew louder. The militia had arrived. The battle was about to begin. "Today we fight for freedom, Coste. Nothing is more important than fighting for the freedom of others." The team prepared. The battle was about to begin. Moments later, the militia convoy breached the base gates, igniting an intense firefight. The team immediately threw smoke grenades into the courtyard, creating an opening for Brandon to launch an attack from the center.
Take cover! Focus!
As the smoke slowly cleared, Brandon sprinted forward, drawing several militia members into pursuit. At the same time, the snipers above provided cover, taking down enemies with precision shots. At the garage, Hera launched a fierce attack while Angel fought from above alongside Timur. However, Hera got cornered and tried to escape, only to be surrounded by several militia members. Wielding her twin axes, she fought brutally, cutting down her enemies one by one. Meanwhile, Z's tower position came under heavy fire from well-armed militia forces. Despite Danielle's efforts to assist, they were overwhelmed. Elsewhere, Angel found herself in a brutal fight against a one-eyed woman. Though her ear was severely wounded, Angel regained control and took down her opponent. Back at the tower, Z was on the verge of losing his position as militia forces rained bullets on him. Seeing this, Brandon, now on the rooftop, grabbed a sniper rifle and targeted an RPG mounted on an enemy vehicle. With a perfect shot, he detonated the RPG, causing a massive explosion that saved Sony and Ciro, who were advancing toward the next strategic point. Meanwhile, the file upload in the lab had reached 91% completion. Inside the kitchen, Ciro ran out of ammo and was forced to fight hand-to-hand. Using his close combat skills, he swiftly took down his attackers. In the office, Brandon was also forced into a brutal one-on-one battle against an enemy soldier. After defeating him, he received word that the upload was almost complete. Suddenly, Nova heard enemy footsteps approaching. Without hesitation, she pressed the first button on the detonation phone, blowing up the corridor and sealing off access to the lab. Brandon rushed to save Nova, but on the way, he was ambushed by multiple attackers. Just as things looked dire, Ciro arrived just in time, swiftly eliminating the assailants. Finally, the data upload in the lab was completed. Nova prepared to cut the power to erase their tracks, but elsewhere, Hera's night vision device was damaged during her earlier fight in the pool. Now, she was blind in the darkness. By the time Brandon arrived to assist her, Hera had already fallen, surrounded by enemies. Outside, BR was shot in the stomach, staggering from the wound. With heavy breaths, he told Ciro, "Maybe my luck has finally run out." Shortly after, Nova, just exiting the lab, was also shot and critically wounded. Brandon tried to keep her spirits up. "Your fight won't be in vain," he assured her. "What the Phoenix rebels have done will be remembered across the country." With the last of his strength, Brandon detonated the lab, wiping out most of the remaining militia. Only a few survived. Sony then urged everyone to escape through the tunnels, insisting that he would stay behind to hold off the enemy. "Go, I'll hold them here," he said. But Brandon refused to let him die. "Your family died with honor on the battlefield. That was their legacy, not yours," Brandon told him. "You won't die a pointless death here." He then turned to Angel and gave a final order. "Make sure this intelligence reaches every agency in the world," he commanded. Determined, Brandon chose to stay behind and fight alone, ordering the team to leave. But just before he faced the next wave of enemies, the rebel forces arrived just in time, rescuing them all. The battle was finally over. Brandon and his team left the war zone, while the rebels discovered that Nova was still alive. The next day, Angel escorted Brandon and the others to the dock. Before parting ways, she looked at him and said, "I'll follow your orders anytime, anywhere." Brandon smiled. "I'll definitely hold you to that," he replied. And with that, the film ends.